The global green transition is built on a colossal financial lie. While the mainstream media celebrates the end of fossil fuels and the birth of a clean world, the true masters of the global economy are executing the largest wealth transfer of our century right under our noses, and almost no one is noticing. If you keep your savings parked in basic fiat currency while ignoring these power dynamics, you are literally agreeing to grow poorer day by day due to decisions made thousands of miles away. Governments tell you that inflation is under control, but the harsh financial reality is that we have entered the era of programmed scarcity, where access to real resources determines who accumulates capital and who loses everything. In this video, we will unveil the underground financial architecture that controls cobalt, the invisible resource driving the electric revolution, and show you exactly how to position yourself to protect and grow your personal wealth before the entire system changes the rules of the game. Ignorance of how these geopolitical and economic dynamics work acts as a silent, invisible tax that drains your capital while you sleep. Most savers make the behavioral finance mistake of only looking at consumer price inflation without understanding that real structural inflation is decided upstream through monopolistic control of physical supply chains. When the state mandates the energy transition by legislative decree, it is effectively creating an artificial scarcity that destroys the purchasing power of paper money in favor of those who own real assets. If you don't understand these rules of asymmetric defense, you will be the one paying the final bill for this global economic restructuring. It all starts in the mud and underground of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, home to over 70% of the world's cobalt reserves. Over 200,000 illegal artisanal miners work here under disastrous human conditions. This raw mineral, extracted outside of any ethical rules, could never be sold directly to Western tech giants like Apple or Tesla, which must comply with strict environmental and social sustainability standards. This is exactly where the cobalt laundering network comes into play. Illegal cobalt is sold to roadside middlemen who melt and blend it with cobalt extracted by large, regulated multinational corporations. Once liquefied, the origin of the cobalt is erased forever on paper, and the mineral suddenly becomes eligible to receive sustainability stamps. This allows major multinationals to keep their market reputation clean and continue selling high-margin products, while the real costs are externalized far from the eyes of Western consumers. But to understand who is really pulling the strings of this laundering machine, we must look at an incredibly complex offshore network headed by a single man. If we want to understand the underground architecture of this financial market, we must follow the tracks of Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler. Through a dense network of shell companies registered in the British Virgin Islands, Gertler managed to buy mining concessions from the Congolese state at rock-bottom prices, only to resell them to European giants like Glencore, turning colossal personal profits. When the United States imposed harsh sanctions on Gertler, banning him from using the dollar due to corruption, many analysts thought his empire was finished. But the financial reality is very different. The sector's major giants continued to pay him millions in royalties in euros and alternative currencies through Swiss intermediaries, just to avoid losing control of the Komoto and Mutanda deposits, the richest on the planet. This teaches us a fundamental macroeconomic lesson. True financial power lies in private offshore structures and golden contracts that national governments cannot touch. And while Europe was trying to impose formal sanctions, an entire Asian state was implementing a strategic plan to conquer the total monopoly of the green transition. While the United States and the European Union focused on internal bureaucratic regulations, China pulled off the greatest geopolitical heist of our century through the 2008 Psychomines Agreement. Beijing offered the Congo an apparently irresistible barter: $6 billion in public infrastructure, like roads, railways, and hospitals, in exchange for copper and cobalt mining concessions with an estimated value of over $10 billion. Much of the infrastructure was never completed or was heavily over-invoiced, but the cobalt continued to travel non-stop toward Chinese refineries. Thanks to targeted strategic acquisitions, Chinese giants like CMOC Group purchased the country's key mines, establishing a structural monopoly that forces every single Western automaker to go through Beijing to produce their electric vehicles. This is modern financial colonialism, controlling the scarce resource at the source to dominate the entire future global market. But the final act of this speculation is not played out in the mines of Africa or the factories of Asia, but rather in the financial temples of Europe. To understand how this geopolitical clash affects your portfolio, we must move to London and the quiet offices of the Swiss canton of Zug. Here, major commodity merchants use complex contracts known as pre-export finance to directly fund the Congolese state treasury in advance in exchange for future cobalt supplies at fixed and heavily discounted prices. This mechanism creates a perpetual debt that forces the country to surrender its physical wealth just to repay the interest on the loans. Because cobalt is a relatively small and illiquid market compared to copper or gold, these large financial operators have the power to manipulate its price at will. By temporarily halting production at a major mine for alleged technical reasons, the cartel can double the price of the mineral in a few months, destroying industrial competitors and generating immense profits for those who control the underground finance. Now that you understand how this power struggle works, the real question you must ask yourself is, how can you protect and position your personal finances in this scenario of programmed scarcity? Understanding these geopolitical and economic dynamics offers you an extraordinary asymmetric advantage compared to the majority of savers who passively suffer market decisions. To defend your personal wealth, you must stop thinking like a passive consumer and start acting like a strategic capital allocator. Here are 3 concrete steps to position yourself financially today. First, reduce your exposure to pure cash in the bank, which is constantly eroded by structural inflation, and allocate a portion of your portfolio to tangible assets and strategic commodities. Second, avoid blindly investing in final electric vehicle manufacturers that suffer from rising material costs, and focus instead on mining and refining companies that hold real concessions and benefit directly from supply scarcity. Third, apply a geopolitical hedging strategy by geographically diversifying your investments into countries and jurisdictions that control the extraction and processing of real resources, rather than limiting yourself to financial markets drugged by Western public debt. Economic history teaches us that when the rules of the global monetary system change, only those who own real resources manage to preserve and multiply their purchasing power over time. Understanding macroeconomics and real geopolitical dynamics is no longer a hobby for academics, but the only indispensable tool for financial defense in a world characterized by growing global tensions. But there is one final detail that the cobalt cartels are desperately trying to hide. This entire clash for control of African mines could be just a giant mass distraction. While the entire world watches the Congo with anxiety, in the most confidential financial circles of Beijing and Washington, the next move is already being planned. A macroeconomic maneuver that will forever change the very concept of monetary sovereignty and make the cobalt war look like child's play. There is another strategic resource, even more militarized and infinitely harder to replace, that is about to undergo an unprecedented historical supply shock, and the decisions to seal its monopoly have already been made behind closed doors. If you think your portfolio is safe just because you own a few tangible assets or because you've diversified your savings, you still have no idea of the shockwave about to hit the global market in the coming months. In the next video, we will analyze this new, unsettling geopolitical secret in extreme detail, revealing the classified documents that mainstream media cannot publish yet, and showing you the exact action plan to protect yourself before it's too late. Make sure you don't miss that moment,
Because when that video goes live, the window of opportunity to act will slam shut in just a few hours. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell right now. The clock is already ticking.